Hit that. Bingo. We're recording. We're live, and great. Hey, it's a great day because I have a special guest returning for part 2 of a conversation. Unjokingly, but not jokingly, I mentioned off air, maybe we'll start a Chronicles. So it'd be the Gary Hobbs Chronicles because my guest today is Gary Hobbs. Welcome. Welcome.
Hello there. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. Last week was really fun. There's so many people watch it too. We got a lot of traffic on the YouTube thing and comments, and I so much appreciate you taking the time again, Gary.
Oh, it's enjoyable. It really is.
Yeah. So, not music wise. I know you got the vaccine. You're done. I get mine in 3 weeks, and then the second dose. And I think, when we were talking about the music scene being vital back 40, 50, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, things changed though in the 80s, it seemed. I really hope that music comes back, live music comes back when people can get out. Because my wife and I were talking this morning, we need to go see some music this summer, outdoors, whatever, because we've done that anyways. And, there's nothing like hearing a live band or playing in one, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's really a missed, it's a really large segment of, speaking as a musician and speaking with my other musicians, that connection you get with a live audience is what I've really realized is what makes the whole circuit happen. Without that, it's a different exercise. You can still make great music and you can still create with your fellow players, but it's really weird when you get done and then there's, I've done one streaming thing with wonderful musicians, but you get done with the tune and there's just no response. We were in a studio and so it's kind of like doing records or something, which is cool, but it's not the same as live performance for sure.
No, and I'll try not to talk too much here today because this is about you. But there's one thing I'll say is I am a late bloomer, and I may have gotten some things sort of right, if there's a right to anything, early on. But I think since I stopped playing a few years ago intentionally, I've really started to understand better the importance of music and hearing it and listening and hearing live music though. I mean, I'll listen to recordings all day long and be very happy. But live music, especially the really special music that I love so much, so things that you have done, things that other players have done who I admire so much. And I was in this position as a younger man of trying to figure out what is right and what's perfect and what's best, who's best, and not actually appreciating what the intention was behind the player or the music or the song or the entity delivering the sonic candy to us, that maybe I would poo-poo this and that and like, oh, I don't like this song. It's really, I'm a little, ashamed to admit it, but especially in talking with you and some other people, this whole experience is, I think missing live music for a year, that had a profound effect on how the importance I now see that music has in people's lives, whether you're creating it, listening to it, or either,
Yeah.
So we got to get live music back.
I agree. My last live thing was almost exactly a year ago.
Wow, man.
That's, after all these years, I mean, to go 2 months without playing with other people set a record for me. But to get to a point where it's been a year is, with the exception of that one streaming thing, it's a kind of a hollow feeling, it's really weird. A lot of the other musicians I talk to, when we talk about these things, it's a very similar just that kind of an emptiness. It's real weird, but hopefully we're on the way back. Well, it's going to be altered, I'm sure, but who knows what that's going to be. That's what I talk to my students about, is they're going to have to create their own reality. I don't think in any way that it will stop, but it's going to look different, that's just evolution. So we'll just, go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen clubs here and there, especially in New York City, maybe Smalls and a couple other places are doing these live gigs. Mike
Right.
Clark played one 2 nights ago.
Right. I saw that.
With like a quarter house filled. So
right.
he said it was great to have some kind of applause or just appreciation.
Sure. Yeah.
But also I saw Jeff Watts did something somewhere recently and it was empty a week ago Thursday. I just happen to remember. Nobody was there, but you got to tune in and watch at least. So that's cool. But it's not the same, right?
No, not
better
at all.
Better than nothing, but not as good as the real deal.
Right.
Well, I just have to say, I have been listening to some cuts on the Of My Times CD that you put out, the recording. You're a hell of a writer, man. Composer. I mean, your version of Fever. Quite honestly, Gary, I'll just be honest with you. I never really liked that song, but now I like this version. Holy crap!
Oh,
I couldn't. There's no way not to like it, in my opinion. Of My Times itself, the orchestration. Holy cow, man! Good for you.
I really appreciate it. It was. I've been on a lot of records, and I had one out before Of My Times called Low Flight Through Valhalla, and I really liked that too. But I was very hesitant to write anything of my own or do my own arrangements, just because I've had great associations with tremendous writers, composers, arrangers, and I just would figure I'll use their material and hire them as players too. And the results was always good. Were always good, but I like to write, and I studied it in school a bit in college. And then through the years, we had different bands that I wrote for. But this time I had a bunch of music that I had been working on with sequencing and stuff like that. And then I realized that I had enough to do an album. Mm-hmm. But I had to wrestle with myself to get the confidence to expose my arranging and composition skills, just because, again, there's been so many phenomenal writers that I've hung out with.
Yeah.
So, I was real pleased with it, though. I really was. And the musicians that are on it are incredible. And my daughters sang Fever, which was fun to have a kid on a project like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to say in the credits, it also says, of course, Gary Hobbs drum set and cajon set. I played cajon in a flamenco band for about a year. I had a blast with it, but it says cajon set. So sounds like there was more than one.
Well, it's a hybrid kind of a thing that I worked on. I started doing it 20 years ago or so. And I was using it just as a drum throne with my drum set.
Sure. Okay.
I had read an article with Alfredo Reyes.
Oh yeah.
And he did that with playing Brazilian music.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started experimenting with it, and then I just kept modifying it. And the cajon set itself is made up of a great big kind of a cube. Mm-hmm. It's called a bajo, like a bass, real low pitched, and you play the sides. There's like two wooden heads that you play on.
Oh, so
and then
that's cool.
Yeah, and then they're all made by a company called Fat Conga, which now no longer exists. But the guy that owned it kept sending me equipment because he thought it was an interesting idea. And so I got one that's more of a flamenco Peruvian style. And then I added a whole bunch of different pedals, operating different devices, different cymbals. Everything is real short sounding and dynamically pretty quiet. And I got to a point where I was using it a whole bunch up here in Portland gigs and stuff. And I love it. It makes you play real different.
Yeah. It's funny. Totally side note, I just remembered the last time I played cajon was 2.5 years ago at a birthday party in Mexico for one of the physical therapists who, when I go there, I stay at her and her spouse's house. So we went down, and that's the neurologist, Dr. Carlos Guerra, is a good bass player, but it was the real deal Mexican thing. And I got to sit in and play the cajon, and it was a blast.
Oh, I bet.
Blast playing just the different authentic Mexican style, and a mariachi band came in, and that's another thing. I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm kind of drifting away for a second from the cajon, but in your travels, because you've traveled all over the world, you must have seen some kind of cool, like real deal, authentic music from. Man, so I'm still not thinking of words the way I want, but you know what I mean?
Like different cultural stuff, or?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that.
Well, yeah. And some of the music I heard, for example, from, say Brazil or Peru or whatever, I haven't been to Brazil or Peru, but I've heard Brazilians and Peruvians playing in, China and Thailand and stuff like that, just because they were traveling and doing their music. So I was highly influenced with this cajon thing by Trilok Gertu.
Oh, yeah.
His playing he did with John McLaughlin, that real hybrid drum set he had. Everything was short sounds. He had, tabla and different kinds of instruments, but that really inspired me, and I really studied that, but mainly just trying to find a sonic niche that was like that. And then I have friends that are pretty world music based, and I would ask them about, especially when I first got the more flamenco-ish cajon. I was trying to find out what are the traditional patterns that I need to learn, and the same with the Cuban kind of one I had. And I had all these questions, and I go up to people and some African guys too, and I go, well, what do I learn here? What's the clave stuff you would learn as a kind of like approaching it like Afro-Cuban music or something? Yeah. But really, the main answer was it's a box. Just play it and listen to the music, and it's like how we learn to play, by listening to recordings. Right. And it's not, because of the primitive nature of it, it's not really extremely hard to learn how to play it. The phrasing is the part that is really the mystery.
I remember learning some of the authentic flamenco rhythms, and well, they do a lot of the offbeat,
homemade stuff,
and the offbeat clapping, and then there were some things were like an 11, which I like. I like odd times. I just kind of enjoy that. Not all the time, but in that I especially liked it. So getting it down, it was a challenge at first. Those rhythms, to be like real deal, not straying outside of the authentic sound as close as we could make it, and the dancers too, because things had to be right for them, or they weren't, and rightly so, they weren't happy. But also the hand positions, whether you're kind of like on a conga, you're hitting with more of the slap of the fingers or cupping or flat palm. I'm sure there are other positions too, or just the fingers themselves. You could get so many sounds out of a box. It's kind of cool.
Well, that's the thing that really attracted me. I wasn't confident enough for a long while to just take one box out and do a gig. And I figured out what the reason was. After all of these years playing drum set, there's always sustain to cover up what you're doing. In that if you hit a cymbal, you got white noise that continues forever. When you're just playing one cajon, there's very little sustain, if any, except just the tiniest bit of kind of a reverb sustain.
Mhm.
So you're totally exposed. And I figured if I'm going to learn how to do this, I'm going to have to get confident. So I booked quite a few gigs at a club in Portland with the pianist Randy Porter, a phenomenal musician from up in this area. And we just played piano and box, but we didn't play Latin music. We played jazz music.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
so I had to learn how to swing on it. I had to learn how to do things other than what you would think the instrument would
yeah.
be, for application. And it was real cool. I just started approaching it more like playing brushes on a snare drum is what it amounted
Mhm.
to. And the
Interesting.
sound you can get, you've got a little drum set in that box.
Yeah.
You've got a bass sound, you've got a snare sound. If you've got loose corners, you get kind of a functioning like a closed hi-hat kind of sound. There's a lot of sonic variation in a good box.
That's right. The one I used actually belonged to the guitar player in that band. I didn't have my own, and that had snares in it. I forgot there was a snare.
Right.
And actually, that was kind of cool because I never thought about this till you just mentioned it. I felt highly exposed, especially in the rehearsals. So rehearsals are always worse than a gig. And I never really did too well in rehearsals, but that the snare was just enough sustain, like a half a second, to like cover up a little bit of stuff. Maybe, I don't know. It was a good experience though. It made me think of rhythm and music differently.
Sure.
And the space between the notes, that
Yep.
stuff like that. By the way, anyone here watching on Zoom or anyone on Facebook, if you have any questions for Gary, and on Zoom, just put them in the chat box. Oh, there's a Q&A here. I didn't see that. And if you're on Facebook, you could just comment in the comments area below the video. Anthony Cusina, he has a question. Says, I have a question for both of you. First, Carl, would you share with us how you went about learning all the technology skills that you are using these days? If you don't mind me asking, I don't know too many technology skills, but are there certain ones you're wondering about? And I'll be happy to answer that. And Gary, what things are you working on these days to improve your playing? He also says he saw your performance, Gary Hobbs, Gary with the cajon on YouTube with the ostinatos and your feet and improvising with your feet. Oh, cool. Improvising with your hands, he meant. Okay. Yeah, Anthony, just let me know what you mean by tech stuff. I don't know a whole lot about any of it, but I'll answer if I can. So, yeah, what are you working on these days, Gary?
Well, to be totally honest with you, since we have no place to perform, most of what I'm working on is just trying to not get atrophied. I'm just trying to sustain, and it's hard. Again, it's a unique drum thing in that we all have friends that play pitched instruments and especially play guitar and piano or keyboards. They can play songs and play chords, and it's a complete thing. For us, since there's really no pitches or anything given off, it is not quite as much fun to play by yourself. That's just my reality. I play with recordings all the time right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to do what I've always done, which is steal from those who I respect. And I've been ripping off a whole bunch of stuff from, especially with the departure of Chick, and before he passed away too. Yeah. I've been playing a whole bunch with Chick Corea records, with Brian Blade, Dave Weckl. Those are the two main ones. Steve had on some of that older stuff. And just I'm still trying to pirate what they do and put it into my applications. I try to make sure my time is feeling good, because all those guys, for example, have their own ride beats, their own time feel, yet it's all relatively metronomics, Yellow Jackets kind of music. And I try to sound and feel in the same arena, but I try to still keep my own voice. So that's as far as my drum stuff. And then trying to talk to, well, like a few months ago, Mike Clark and I, we'd known each other just, on the periphery a little bit. We know a lot of the same people, but when he would come through Portland every now and then, we'd see each other. But he and I have started communicating more on Facebook, and one day we just talked on the phone for about 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. And getting his input on what he's doing and watching some of the things he's put up on YouTube, that inspires me. And I try things that others have mentioned. So I read a lot of other posts by drummers and try to experiment with what they're doing. Most of it works really well. Some of it doesn't maybe grab me as much as others, but honestly, right now it's just trying to make sure my endurance, my time feel, and my technique is being sustained. That's the main thing right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important thing, because when the call comes in and you can do that live gig, you want to be able to do it comfortably, right? You want to make sure you can execute as needed. Yeah, and Anthony, I got your note. Yeah, get back to me offline. I'll be happy to help however I can. So it's interesting. This topic has come up a lot. We talked about it last time too, but no matter what instrument, finding your own voice is a thing, And I appreciate that you shared that you're playing along with records or recordings. And my mom is watching. Hey, Mom. Remember, I used to play with records all the time and drown out the whole neighborhood. We had very patient, forgiving neighbors, especially in the summer when the windows were open.
Yep, same here.
So, but back then, as a teenager, it was all about copying, because that's how I learned, and playing along with. I played along with everything, but as we develop and move forward in our career, like you said, you're taking stuff and you're using it, stealing stuff that you said. I mean, that's what I do too, right? But you're also keeping your own voice, and that's so important. So I'm really glad you said that again. And that's a subject that comes up a lot, is having your own voice, because you can't actually be the other people because you're not them. But the inspiration and the ideas and the techniques, it's great. We all learn from everybody. That's good. So we were talking before we went live. I was curious about pivotal points in your career, like some of the most pivotal points. I know we touched on Stan Kenton last time. We talked about Stan a lot, and that just, what a great experience, especially, you're doing so many gigs a year and clinics and teaching people. And when you were doing that, I mean, what did you take away from when you left Stan, when that was done? Could you, was there anything in particular, like top 1, 2, 3, or whatever, like just things that you took with you from that experience that really transformed or helped you in your career, or how you approach drumming or music?
Okay. I think one of the things that I took away really wasn't as much about music per se as it was just human relations. When you're trapped on a bus riding around like 75 through 77 with 20 guys, you have to figure out how to get along. You have to figure out how to, I guess, be tolerant. I don't know what the word is, but you need to honor other people's space, and everybody had to coexist. And then also at the same time, you had to develop a real confidence and commitment in yourself and in this, your own voice, like you mentioned, so you could kind of go on your own path. Those things really really affected me. Also being on time, because if you were late for the bus or something like that, it was very unpleasant. It was very embarrassing, and it reinforced the idea of just being professional. I think the word professional is probably the main one. You learn how to play when you feel really ill, or maybe you're having a feud with somebody in the band. You have to drop all that when you go on stage, at least. And so those kind of things really helped professionally, of course, but overall just in existence. But the main thing, I think consistency is one thing that you get out of playing 7 nights a week, 48 weeks of the year. It's kind of, it's a byproduct of that existence. So like when I left Stan's band, that was the bar that had been set for me, was like every single time you play, you have to bring your A+ game every single time. And the other thing was that this is probably not the most best quality I've had, but there was always somebody that wanted your gig. There was only X amount of those kind of things at that time. And so, for example, we played at Buddy Rich's place once, and I look off to the right and there's like, a dozen guys there with manuscript paper, and they're scrutinizing everything you do. And some guys, were kind of vibing you a little bit. And I remember one time I walked out on that gig, I walked off the stage and this kid came up with a piece of manuscript, and it's just like the black page, it was just notes all over the place. And he says, can you play this? Jeez. And I looked at it, it's got these bracketed 13 note things and blah, blah, blah. I went, no. And he goes, you just did, man. That was your solo.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at it and I went, no, that's not what was in my mind when I played. And then, those kind of things, you have to learn how to just float with it, not let it get to you. Don't get dark. Don't get nervous about it. It's just the way of it, So you learn just there's a certain kind of toughness that you get from that existence, an appreciation of the world of music, because you're playing in all these different towns every night, different crowds, different venues, different functions for the music. I mean, it was usually concerts, but sometimes dances. And so you had to learn how to just on a daily basis be hitting on all the cylinders. So I think those are the main things I got out of it. And of course, a great network of friends and fellow musicians to draw upon as my career continued.
Interesting. Yeah. So I'm just curious, on a side note, I was always curious to know what Buddy's place was like, because he had a club down there in New York.
Yeah, it was cool. It was wonderful. I think we all dug it, partially because I think it was like 5 nights, maybe 6 nights in one place, which is unheard of,
It's like a working vacation, sort of.
Right. And then the other thing that the band loved overall, we used to set up in remember that V configuration, like saxes would be on one side, trombones, and then trumpets there. And it was, for the drummer, it was incredible because the rhythm section's in the middle of it all. So it's this huge, beautiful stereo kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the band, it was really rough. Like if there's a unison with a bass trombone and a bari sax, they're literally 25 yards apart. And so trying to play in tune and match up your time and everything, it could work because we were playing all the time. But it was, much easier. We used, a stacked thing, trumpets in the back, bones in the middle, saxes in front.
Yeah.
I was always of the school like Buddy, where you sit in the trombone row and you can hear everybody. I could touch, everybody's tight.
Yeah.
And so the band was just really, really happy doing it. And actually, one of the Barry players, Alan Yankee, recorded the whole thing every night.
Oh.
And he got some really good recordings, and they're up on YouTube.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a great club. To me, it was just a real pinnacle kind of gig at that time.
Yeah, I never went to that club. I was, a little too young at the time. But yeah, I have a record. I think, no, I know I do. It's with Bob Cranshaw and Kenny Barron and Sal Nestico and Buddy, that live at Buddy's place. Yeah.
Wow.
Sal's actually from this area, around Syracuse, New York. His brother. I don't know if you ever knew Sal. Did you ever get to work with him?
No, he was my hero because of my dad. My dad we'd listen to those early 60s Woody records with Bill Chase and Jake Hanna and all those. Yeah. And my old man, my dad would, anytime Sal took a solo, which was on a lot of those tunes, he would just start screaming with pleasure because the time was just burning, like the Apple Honey and Caledonia and all that stuff. Yeah. That was really, super, super, super fast. Mm-hmm. Sal would kill it. I never got to meet him or play with him. He was one of the greats. I think he influenced a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never saw him or met him either. I did one gig with his brother, Jimmy, at a jazz fest. Jimmy's in Arizona, also a saxophonist. He's great. Yeah. Sal was a special talent. So you were mentioning though, another thing, I was just curious. So what was it like for you to come off the Kenton band and then then you're staying off the road? What was that transition like?
Well, it was kind of, Stan had an accident. I don't know if you remember that part. He fell down and hit his head in Pennsylvania, I think it was, and was severely injured, and he had to leave.
Okay.
And we stayed out on tour for a couple months, I guess it was, somewhere in there. And we had different people fronting the band. Buddy DeFranco came out and did it.
Oh yeah.
Mel Lewis fronted us one night in
oh wow.
In Nassau Pavilion in Long Island.
Okay.
That's a whole nother story. But the band continued on. Dick Shear kind of was the one that kept the business part of it going and kept everybody in line. Mm-hmm. And everybody, we wanted to stay out, and we finished the tour in I think it was late July or something like that. It was the day Elvis died. I remember that.
So this is 1977?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so nobody knew what was going to happen. Usually we would take 2 weeks off and come back, but no, Stan's condition was totally up in the air. Nobody knew. It was a real severe head injury. Mm-hmm. So usually when we go on break, I just leave my drums and everything on the bus, and come back 2 weeks later. But this time I since it was so unknown, I had, Chad Wackerman.
Oh yeah.
His family was from Seal Beach, down by where we finished up that tour, and they took me to the airport in a van. His dad and mom, everybody, they were so nice.
Wow.
And I flew my stuff home, and it was just a big question mark as what was going to happen. So my wife, we weren't married yet, but we'd met in college and stuff. We'd been together for a long while. And she kept taking me out to clubs in Portland area. Mm-hmm. And we'd go out on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. I think she took us out a couple nights in a row on off nights. And you hear these great bands and really cool venues and with really good crowds. And it was just startling,
Yeah.
And then also the idea of these guys get to sit down in some of these gigs for long periods of time. They don't even have to move anything. That was kind of an attractive thing.
Absolutely.
So as I started getting established in the Portland scene, I just would go out everywhere and meet guys. I knew some of them already.
Mhm.
Then I got an opportunity to play with this keyboard player named Tom Grant. And at that
Oh
time,
yeah.
he had
Mhm.
a four-piece fusion band that was just exactly the kind of music I liked. And it was one of the really popular bands in the Portland area. The other one was Jeff Lorber's Fusion.
Oh yeah.
Our two bands used to rotate through different clubs, especially a club named Ray's Helm. You go in there for a
Okay.
couple weeks and you play 3 or 4 nights a week.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that was extremely attractive. And I got my foot in there, and I just loved it. I loved the whole thing. And then when I got called to go back out with Stan, it was still up in the air what his condition was. And I just had a bad feeling about it. So I didn't take the call. I decided I'd stay home and try to move on and do something different. That was the main motivation for that.
Mhm.
But as I got to know the community, there were 20 jazz clubs in Portland, which isn't a
Oh,
big
wow.
town.
Right.
And there
Yeah.
were bands. There were so many bands that had original music, the same guys every time they played, as opposed to pickup groups.
Mhm.
And they're all styles: fusion, bebop, out, neo bop, big band
Mhm.
stuff. It was just remarkable, and the people were very supportive. The community, and pay was good, so I just stayed. It was wonderful.
That's cool. That's cool. So I'm sorry, did you say did Lorber come through there, or is he from that
Oh,
area?
he was living in where I live in Vancouver, Washington, for quite a while. In
Oh,
fact, my
okay.
my wife, I think, taught one or two of his children in elementary school.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was I think he's from Philly originally,
I think so.
but he had landed out here.
I'd seen him. It's funny. I've run into him a few times over the years, and then once I got to know Jimmy Haslip quite a while back.
Hmm.
Then I started to get to know Jeff a little bit, just a little bit, not a lot. But we were talking about how one of his first tours with Jeff Lorber Fusion. And this is just a side note because it's kind of a fun story. Is there's a place here up at the university, Syracuse University, called the Jabberwocky, which was the happening place. I mean, Return to Forever was there. It was a small club, maybe get 150 people in at the very most, and Mahavishnu and uh, Headhunters. Um, and I was a little bit young, but I was able to go there though. I think I was gigging one night, and I went out because Lorber was playing there afterwards, late '70s with Jeff Lorber Fusion. So when we were talking about where I'm from, he said, "Oh yeah, man, I remember playing the Jabberwocky." Really well, because it's been gone for like 40 years now. That was the happening place too for really good bands and musicians to come through, stop, do a gig, maybe a clinic at the university because it's right on the campus. But that's cool. So yeah, I think Jeff lives in the LA area here for quite a while.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But at that time in Portland, since there were all these venues, I was able to make after our daughter was born in '79. One night, there was a gig that we had with Tom Grant's band. It was a different iteration of it. That first band that was playing with during the time when Jeff Lorber was here was a guy named Todd Carver, played guitar. Rob Thomas played bass and violin, and Tom played uh, mainly Rhodes and synthesizer and sang. And it was a tremendous band, and we were working all the time. But then Tom got and
Excuse me.
Todd got called to do Tony Williams' gig
Oh wow.
during that
And
time where he had the Joy of Flying
yeah, okay.
band.
I
Bunny
remember the album
Brunell.
cover. Oh,
Yeah,
Bunny
exactly.
Brunell. That's right. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
they went out and toured, and I think they were around the world and stuff.
Yeah.
And during that time, then I started working with a kind of freelance. I was playing with David Friesen's group,
Sure.
uh, a guy named Dan Siegel is another kind of a fusion artist, and then just pickup gigs around town, and again was 5, 6, 7 nights a week working. And then when Tom moved back, he kind of reformed the band, and a guy named Dave Capteen was playing bass, and Dan Balmer was playing guitar. And we got a gig where we played for 3 years, 5 nights a week in the same club. I just left this giant recording custom Yamaha kit set up for 3 years. It didn't move.
Jeez,
it was tremendous. It was just so incredible. And the family was getting to be known as a kind of a smooth jazz success. But he had played with Tony, Joe Henderson, a bunch of others, really great musician.
Wow.
And that whole period, a lot of guys could have steady gigs with a band, and then on Sunday, Mondays, play like with a big band for a kicks band or something. Or you could sub on guys' wedding gigs or whatever. So you were constantly playing and making money. And one night at this club called Cousins, I sat at the bar on a break, and there was a traveling salesman who was just blowing through town. And he was pretty lit up, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I went, "Well, I'm doing this." He goes, "You're lucky. Stay home. Don't go on the road. I lost my wife. I lost blah, 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 blah." And my daughter was really young, and I was going out and doing some clinics at that time for Slingerland, and it was a good thing. But then I looked at what this guy said. I don't know why, it really hit me. And I just made an agreement with myself that I was going to stay home and play with these good musicians in town and record and do all these things until she grew up. And then I would try to go out and continue to travel more. So that was kind of you talk about turning points. This one guy at the bar, that was the real turning point. And it was perfect because at that time, Portland had everything you needed to play with really good musicians, write music, play in bands that were real bands, and then have side things. It was tremendous. Everything was perfect. All the cards were dealt right.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's really insightful. And I never traveled when my kids were young, hardly. And I'm really glad I was around, because you don't get a second chance for,
right. I'm just so glad.
I think that's
the best thing I did,
personally, a great decision you made too, because we all know musicians or people who've traveled a lot who lose, well, how can you keep things up? Family and spouse, and it works out a lot of times, but other times it doesn't work. And I don't know, I had to look back and think of how lucky I am too. And now as the pandemic is maybe even a vision of somewhat getting back to normal later this year or next year, and travel will happen, and we can do live workshops where I teach. No, I can do it on Zoom. I have a granddaughter now, I want to be around her. I just saw her today. Right. She's just so beautiful. I don't want to miss anything. And I don't know, just chiming in with that.
No, it's family is true.
Family is. Like I said, I'm a late bloomer, but I don't think I really appreciated family. And the older I get, the more I appreciate it. Let's put it that way.
No, I agree.
I need to do a better job of being interactive in certain ways, but yeah. So that's interesting. You did that. You took that time. You stayed home. You had what you needed, because it's also a great time period to be able to, the gigs were happening. 70s and 80s, man. Those were good years for gigs.
They were tremendous.
I think everywhere, even in Syracuse. Even in Syracuse, we could work like 5 nights a week. Not necessarily same place, but maybe it's 5 different places or whatever, or within an hour or two from here, Rochester, Albany, Utica. There's always something going on. And
right.
Yeah. And plus, that's kind of cool, because you get to expand your musical vocabulary and experience by working with all these different players.
Absolutely.
Different music.
It was just that was the best part. I loved being in a band.
Mhm.
That was really cool. But I also liked that I had a couple nights a week where I could do something else to make me maybe appreciate being in the band a little bit more or whatever. And when Britta went away to college, she went up by Seattle, and that was a real rough year for me, that empty nest thing, you know.
Mhm.
And so my wife is from Seattle, and her parents lived up there. And I knew a lot of musicians up there from even when I was in college. But it was like Portland was a scene and Seattle was a scene. And it's only, 2.5, 3 hours apart. So I really wanted to see her a whole bunch just to visit. And so I started taking gigs in Seattle and staying at my wife's parents' place.
That's
And
cool.
I realized how convenient that was, and that I really loved playing with these guys up here. So I would do that. And then on the way home, I'd stop and visit my daughter. Well, it ended up that helped spin out a whole nother community that I could play in. And so about the time things started kind of going downhill everywhere, but Portland was one of the last ones to kind of have a decline in the work scene.
Mhm.
But then I had like Seattle and Portland as places I could play and still not have to travel too much. And by that time, when she went to college, I did start traveling. I started calling upon those old connections I mentioned that I had made on the road with Stan. And most of it was jazz education things that we had done because we did all those clinics and workshops. And so I walked right into being able to, I was out on the road doing stuff like that for maybe a third of the year. And Yamaha drums and a couple different cymbal companies through the years would help with doing that. And so that worked just perfectly, as a launching pad.
Gee, that's cool. I was reading somewhere that, well, actually, I think it was your website. You've taught over in China too, right? You've made a few trips to
Well,
China.
that was one of the newer blossoms, that came off of this. Maybe 10 years ago now or somewhere in there. There's a organization called Jazz Education Abroad.
Mm.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's a man named Gene Aiken who used to teach at University of Northern Colorado, used to teach out in the Northwest way back. And I'd kind of known him. I didn't know him real well, but he would show up at concerts and festivals and stuff. And he asked me to go over to Shanghai and do this festival. And I'd never been to Asia, and it was a workshop kind of a thing where you teach and play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gratefully accepted, and it was a brand new adventure. I mean, I felt like I was 18. It was just a whole new territory, and the other musicians are from all over the country and all over the world. So it was introduction to new people and reestablishing older friendships, and the chemistry is phenomenal. And so we did that. We did Hangzhou. We've done Hong Kong. We've done Bangkok.
Wow.
A lot of these different places. And right before the very end of February, right about now, last year we were supposed to be in Bangkok.
Mm-hmm.
But that's right when everything went off the rails. So we've been unable to do any of that. So hopefully that'll clear out and that will open up again.
Yeah, I've only been to Singapore. It's the only place in Asia. And
it's wonderful. You talk about the road and experiences and seeing new things, the cultural stuff, just the people. And it's really been wonderful. I really, really, really like it. It's opened my worldview a whole bunch. And music is the glue that is holding it all together too, right? I mean, you could have diametrically opposed political systems or whatever, yet you can sit and not even share the same language and play a 4-hour gig with somebody. it's pretty cool.
I was just thinking the same thing. A couple gigs I've done. I didn't have a lot of experience with this, but a couple times I remember um, two different people coming in. No, they didn't speak any English. Yet when it came time to play, we were delivering the same thing, speaking
Right.
musical language. So, did Kenton's band ever tour Asia at all? I mean, you went to Japan, right?
They
But
did, but it was right before I joined. Peter was still playing drums the last time that
oh,
they
okay,
went over to Asia.
okay, yeah, interesting. I know it seems like the well, from what I've heard from Peter and some others who've gone to Asia and performed, the audience is very receptive.
Tremendously so, especially
Yeah.
China, in
Mhm.
that jazz music itself was not accepted culturally.
Mhm.
And I think in a lot of ways by the leadership,
Mm.
in that you tell me something that is more free and open
Mm.
to individual creativity than jazz music, right? And
Right.
it wasn't embraced. And then all of a sudden, the wall came down, and we did it was called the first China Jazz Education Festival
Okay.
in Shanghai. And it was uh, from that first one until 10 years later, to see the change in the
Mhm.
personalities,
Oh,
the loosening up of people, they're really going for improvisation. Before, it was really hard to get everybody to come out. And these were conservatory trained musicians that had great ability,
mhm.
but to just make things up and show your soul was not an easy thing for them to do. And the last time we were there, these guys are having the greatest time of their life. You know,
See,
it
that's
was a
cool.
very big deal to witness that.
Yeah, it said I have not. Well, just Singapore. I've always wanted to go to China and Japan. Always, and I'm sure I will at some point. But I've got to get geared up for it mentally and physically. Just because it's a long flight, and I don't like long flights.
That's the part I hate. I don't like
Yeah,
that at all.
you know, I have a little bit of a phobia of airports. I'm okay, but flying is fine. It's just I'm after 30 minutes, I've had enough, and I'd like to get off. I like being on planes for a little bit of time, but
Right.
you know, if Elon Musk can just, Mr. Musk, can you please develop something that gets us from here to China in like 20 minutes? If
He's
anyone
probably
can do
working on it.
it, he can do it. I know he can.
Right.
Uh, you know, or maybe we'll just travel backwards in time. Um, so I was also curious about other, let's say, other pivotal or just amazing, great experiences that you recall that for any reason at all, whether it's you learned something that just really changed how you think of things, or even just one little thing, maybe, or just great gigs, special gigs. I mean, because I have to ask on your resume, you have a lot of my favorite musicians on, you know, Christlieb and Randy Brecker. I wanted to ask you about that.
Well,
When did that
Chris,
happen? What was the situation? I know you got called a lot to do when people will come out west. You're like first call, right? So you got a lot. You got to work with a lot of people like that.
that's that most of everything. A lot of those names that are on my bio are people that I played with in the Northwest, as opposed to touring long tours,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or the not necessarily the Northwest, but West Coast. And there's a camp that happens up here at a place called Centrum, which is in Port Townsend, Washington. It's kind of northeast of or northwest of Seattle, up by the Straits of Juan de Fuca. Just this absolutely beautiful area. And it's a great jazz camp workshop. It's my favorite one after all these years of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Bud Shank used to run it.
Oh yeah.
And I played with Bud's quartet and sextet. We went over to Europe with that one time. And I got to be pretty close with Bud. And he was the one that put this workshop together. And it drew from from LA mainly. So you had Christlieb, Bobby Shew, George Cables.
Yeah.
Just, it wasn't just LA, but it was, real world-class name people. And everybody would teach and play through the week. And so you get to play concerts, you get to play workshops, clinic kind of settings.
Mm-hmm.
Then you work in the clubs at night. So you do like 3-hour gigs with these people. And then again, like with Pete, whenever Pete would come up, he now lives up by Seattle. Chrisley, we would, he'd throw something together and we would play. With Randy Brecker, it was a thing where, 30 years ago maybe, he came out to the Northwest to do an album with a guy named Chris Parker, who's a keyboard player that used to live in Portland. Then he moved down to the Oregon coast, and then he moved out to Middletown, New York. It had a teaching gig there. So his first album, he wanted to use Randy on it. So Randy came out, and then we recorded that, and that was our first time I was able to meet and hang out with him. Then we did a gig up in Middletown with him and Bob Mincer playing with the rhythm section. Mm-hmm. And then Randy would come out to the Seattle area to play with a guy named Rich Cole, not Richie Cole. It's a guy named Rich mm-hmm. Cole. He's a tenor sax player. And he used Randy on, I don't know, 3 or 4 albums, and I got to play on those. And then anytime Randy would come up, we'd get gigs, mm-hmm. sometimes under Randy's name, sometimes under Rich's name, and we'd work clubs. Great. So that's how that connection came about. And a lot of the other people on that list are that way. It was recording and kind of jazz workshop, clinic kind of things that would pull us together. And then off of that would come other performances.
Interesting. I mean, Randy's a hell of a player, man.
Oh, I've always liked the whole Brecker Brothers stuff. Mm-hmm. Was that knocked me down when they first came out. And then like heavy metal bebop with Bozio. I mean, these are like holy grail things, And I've been following these guys forever. I never got to meet or play with Mike, mm-hmm. but I have a pretty good friendship with Randy. And, you talk about pivotal things. It's that kind of thing to play with these people and, and get called back to do it again.
Absolutely.
There's times where you play with them you just love, and then you never hear from them again. And that's when your brain takes over. But he's, I don't know. I just think Randy Brecker is one of the absolute giants, and he's also one of the nicest, most humble men, and he's also extremely funny. He's just a very comical man,
He is. I've only had 2 conversations with him ever. One at Scullers in Boston, the jazz club. He was playing with Lorber, Weckel, Gary Meek, and it's the Brian Bromberg thing. It's actually Bromberg's gig. Man, that guy can play too. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I had no idea. He was upright all night. And then so I talked with Randy for a while there. But then I had been asking him if he would consider joining me to do one of these. And last August he said, yes, if you don't mind if Eric Marienthal joins me and we both talk to you. It's like, that's not a problem.
Right.
So what it is, they had that new, it's called Double Dealin', I think it's the name of the CD. And so we did a thing about the upcoming movie, which was like 3 weeks after the interview. And actually, it was really hard not to just be laughing all the time because Randy's really funny.
Oh, he's really, really funny. And, Eric, those gigs we were talking about over in Asia, we've done 3 or 4 things over there with that jazz education abroad. And he's like one of the Beatles over there. He is a huge fan favorite.
Mhm.
And there's another tremendously nice
Yeah.
guy.
What
But
a
you know,
yeah. Mhm.
they Gene Aiken and the people that run that organization, they bring in like Antonio Hart, Eric Alexander,
Oh, wow.
Robin Eubanks did the last one we did. And so you get to play every day, rehearse, and teach with these guys. And it's one thing that's happened as a byproduct of the live gig, not because of COVID, but I mean, just live music kind of declining since
Mhm.
like the 90s or whatever. More musicians were forced into teaching. I don't
Yes.
mean necessarily private instruction, but doing workshops and
Mhm.
clinic work. Guys that maybe didn't necessarily want to, but were definitely competent, but didn't have to do it, so they would maybe avoid it. Well,
Mhm.
now, I mean, guys like Ken Paplowski, who's another phenomenal musician and maybe the funniest guy ever. He's, you know, his whole career has supported himself purely by playing, right? So when
Mhm.
COVID hits, he's living in New York trying to make rent, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, no income. It's a real hard thing. So he's opened up more to Zoom teaching.
Mhm.
I think Dave Weckel's doing a little bit more. Jeff Hamilton was doing a little bit more. I think Mike Clark is doing a little bit more, you know, just
Yeah, they
out
are.
of
Yeah.
necessity. And these guys all have so much to offer. Uh, Over in Asia, did one. That was another pivotal, just to watch him do his clinics and do them with him, and then have him sit down on the drums and play like Elvin. You know,
Who was that?
just Dave Liebman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
Oh.
mean, just you know, these are guys that they're not that much older than me, but I've idolized them. Some of them are even my same age and a little younger. They've just been people I've really held high,
Mhm.
and to get to play with them, especially later in life, I think I appreciated it more. I would appreciate it more than if I did it when I was younger.
Yeah. I can
Maybe
understand
not, but
that.
I think so.
No, you know what? It makes sense. I think I share that with you, and of course, my experience and abilities are completely different than the professional's professional. That would be you, but just the experience of well, you know, recording a CD 2 years ago, which was really more of a fundraiser type effort for Parkinson's, but you know, to have Scott Kinsey and Jimmy, who I knew, I mean, and Jeff Richmond and Urson comes in and donates time, talent, and name for a couple songs, Gary Novak. And so I got to meet them and hang out and watch them in session. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
and and I think if I did that 15 years ago, I would have been too star stricken.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't handle it, so I wouldn't have been able to appreciate it the same way. This was just a really nice meeting of great people putting out really nice music, and you know, it's my one thing I ever did. If you want to call it a solo project, I play on 2 songs, but it wasn't about me. It's about something else, something way bigger. Uh, yeah. So I was going to ask you. We were talking. See, China. Oh yeah. So Dennis Chambers, uh, Mike Clark. I think even Lenny White. I'm not sure. And then a number of others are doing private teaching, Zoom teaching.
Right.
But they're also, you know, there's these things that have started up like Meat Hook and some other entity which you can go and look for someone to teach you, and like some of them are on there. Hey, Skip Haddon is here. How you doing? You know Skip, right? At Berkeley.
I
You
know the name. We haven't met.
Oh, you got to meet Skip. Skip, I have an idea. I'm going to send you later in an email. So I'll run it past you today in an email. And I can't say what it is right now because I have to find out if you're okay with it. So I'll find out and then I'll keep everyone posted. Yeah, Skip's great. So we're switching subjects for a minute. This is Skip's book, a book he wrote, I should say, that he sent me. The original title was The Beat, the Body, and the Brain, which
Oh,
thing given the work that I do, the way
right.
he so succinctly ties everything together. By the way, have you ever seen? Did you ever know? Just of drummer interest here, especially drummers. Did you ever know Lenny DiMuzio at Zildjian?
Sure.
Okay,
Oh, yeah. When I joined, I had an endorsement with Zildjian starting in '75,
okay.
and he was the guy. I mean, Armin was still there. In fact, there used to be a club in Chicago called the Back Door or
I
Back
know
Room.
exactly where that was, the back room,
Okay,
because I used to
and
work
Judy.
there when I lived there. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
well, Judy Roberts used to play there a lot.
Judy Roberts. I know Judy. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
so whenever Kenton's band was in Chicago, the first thing I would do when we got done with our gig, if we got done early enough, which was a lot of the times if we did concerts at schools, I'd get a cab and I'd go over there and she'd let me sit in with them.
Oh, cool.
And it was just all those guys were so nice because you want to play something small instead of big, you just
Yeah,
need that.
yeah.
But anyway, the way it was set up, remember there was kind of a bar that went around the stage a little bit.
Yep.
Well, I'm playing and we're doing something, and all of a sudden we're getting to where you're doing 4s and 8s and that kind of stuff. And I was aware that these people had just come in and were sitting right next to me, but they're kind of loud, and I just didn't want to acknowledge them. I was just trying to concentrate on the band, which was to my right. So we start playing, and I'm doing 8s or 4s, 8s, and we go up to choruses. But each time it was my turn, there would be a voice that would come from my left, and it'd go, Buddy, Gene, or Tony, or whatever,
Oh man.
And they're telling me who to sound like playing my 4s. And I wasn't enjoying this at all. I just figured, here's some professional drunks that are not making my life fun. And finally I look over and it's Armin Zildjian, Lenny DiMuzio, and I can't remember the third guy. And they were just busting, they were absolutely doubled up laughing, and it ended up being a great experience. But Lenny was he was a wonderful, wonderful cat. He was just tremendous. He was tremendous.
Well, he is. Do you know John DeChristopher?
Yeah, I don't know him well, but sure. I was a Zildjian. I kept being a Zildjian artist until about 10, 12 years ago, and I shifted away. But he was in there at that time.
Yeah, he probably left about 10 years ago, I think. John did. But the reason I asked about Lenny is because actually through John DeChristopher, I have met, not in person, well, Skip had, but also Teresa DiMuzio, Lenny's daughter. And this book, do you have this?
No, but I think somebody put it up on Facebook the other day. Was that you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't know of it.
This is such a great book, full of stories about
I bet.
everybody. Elvin's in here, Tony, Peter, Gad, and I'm only like maybe 50 pages through it because I spend too much time looking at the pictures because I like to look at pictures. But I mean, it just has so many. Louis Belson here, maybe up towards.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, actually, that looks like maybe no, that's not the promo shot. My dad loved Louis, so I got to meet Louis a few times when I was very young. But these are great stories. Every page. Oh, there's Maynard Ferguson with Armand Zildjian and Lenny. There's just so many great pictures and funny stories.
I'll have to check that out.
I saw it on Amazon too. It's like under $20 or something. So I have a funny story. I'll say it real quick because I never knew either Lenny or Armand. It's probably about 11, 12 years ago. I'm at this place in Cooperstown, New York called the Otasaga Hotel to do. I usually worked out there during the season once or twice a month with different jazz groups. Really pretty drive, pretty place, huge, really cool place. So I had a Jeep Wrangler, and I pull up the back seats out. I got my little Slingerland kid in there, and there's these two ladies standing on the stairs, and one of them says, "Oh, are you the drummer?" As I'm unloading, and it's pretty obvious. So that question didn't really flag me. Well, what kind of music do you play? Oh, probably mostly jazz standards or maybe some R&B. Depends upon the crowd. Oh, cool. And now this is taking a while for her to ask these questions. I'm just saying them quickly now for the sake of time. So what kind of drums are those? So, well, I've got a couple sets. This is a little Slingerland set from the late 60s. Oh, cool. And they're talking back and forth. And then she says, what kind of cymbals do you play? Like, okay, this is pretty interesting because nobody asked me that, except maybe a drummer. And I told her, I said, well, I have a kind of a bunch here. I got a Bosphorus ride I love. I have Istanbuls that I love. I have some Paiste. And she says, oh, okay, good. Well, why do you play those cymbals? I'm like, okay, this is getting kind of strange in a very funny way. I said, well, it really just has to do with the sound and the feel and the response. And what I use just depends upon the gig. Well, that makes sense. And then I finished unloading, put the stuff on one of those hotel, luggage carts. And the other lady says, oh, come on. She slaps her like on the shoulder, hits her like, come on, just tell him. And she says, oh, no, there's nothing to tell him. He seems like a nice guy. And then the other lady says, okay, I'm just going to tell you, this is Andy Zildjian, Armand's wife. And I'm like,
Oh.
Whoa. No. So before that, though, I opened up the symbol. That's right. I opened up the bag. I show her all these things. I showed her all this. And I said, I don't know what you know about the cymbal industry, but, probably the most well-known is Zildjian. And she says, oh, do you have any of those? I forgot about this part of the story. I said, oh, yeah, they're at home. I said, oh, okay. And then I found out it was her. Thank God I mentioned Zildjian, right?
Right. Absolutely.
That's
it's great.
This is just not long after he passed away, maybe a couple of years after Lenny passed away. But she was really sweet. She came out and stayed for 2 sets. We hung out and talked. She's all kinds of stories about Buddy and everybody, So it's really it was a great meeting. It was fun.
Oh,
And
yeah, I bet.
she also
That's
told
really
me a
cool.
lot of stories about how there are a lot of stories about Armand and Lenny that can't be told.
Oh, I'm sure.
History. Yeah. That should be a different chronicle that somebody should try to organize. The Lenny and Armand stories.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, okay. So what are, I was curious to know this album that I was mentioning earlier of yours, of My Times. I mean, we touched on this earlier, but the writing on that, the arranging on that's just beautiful. And you did this. And where do you see yourself doing more of that kind of thing and putting out more recordings?
Well, I definitely see myself writing more. In fact, I've just been updating my my equipment here at home for my studio. I got a new computer, got some new powered speakers, some new interfaces, microphones. So I'm getting to a point where I can. I like to write, and a lot of that stuff on that album was quite a while ago, and so I would use like a sequencer called master tracks, and just so I learned how to get, just take snippets. I'd play the stuff in and then just see if it would work before I would bring it into the musicians. Well, now, even with the garage band, that level thing, or Pro Tools or whatever, it's much easier to compose at home, and not just to see if it's going to be okay to bring into professional players. I can actually start recording things here that I could send to other people and have them put their parts on, because of what COVID has done, right? I want to get back, of course, to where you go into the studio and record all by yourself. I mean, all together, But I've stretching to a point now where I really want to write more and more. Over this last year, I've been writing a lot of lyrics. Right now, poetry, because they're not hooked up with the music. But I have songs in my head. Now I just need to fill it out, and then I'm going to have other guys put in their parts too. So I do. As far as making albums, I think so, but I don't, with the way the industry is, CDs and stuff like that, like all my students, like down at University of Oregon, for example, or these workshops I do, nobody even buys CDs. That's like 78s,
Well,
everything is.
I'll show you something here. See those two boxes?
Yeah.
That's 500 CDs for my CD that I came out with 2 years ago. And I ended up giving most of them away because it's like a business card these days, People go and they download, they stream,
that's it.
Whatever. So, the CD thing itself, it costs a lot of money. I mean, recording can cost a lot depending upon if you can and produce it yourself, record it in your own studio or whatever, but paying musicians. But the CD process is, CDs are antiquated pretty much.
Absolutely. It's like 78s to,
right.
So, this is, again, it's evolutionary. I definitely don't get in that school where you go, well, in the old days when you could do this, I don't want to do that. So I'm just trying to pay attention to see what's changing. And I teach my students that they have to be the change. They're the ones that have to usher in whatever this next phase of creativity is going to be. And there's always going to be people writing music. The streaming, as far as fitting into being a professional musician, streaming and that kind of stuff is not the friend of a professional musician. You're not making your 15 or 20 bucks from your CD sale. I used to go out on the road and I would bring X amount of CDs with me and sell those. And that would make the trips worthwhile. That has changed. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm undecided as to, if I'm going to do like full CDs. I love the old school album approach to music where you like that Of My Times thing. I really spent a lot of time deciding what the programming was going to be, which tune came after the next one. It's like a journey.
I like that.
And that, again, is kind of an antiquated thing because everybody's buying single downloads.
Yeah.
Buying it. So there's modifications I'll have to make, but I will still, if I do a, say, 10 tune project, I would still try to have a curve in it. I'll never get rid of that.
But that's kind of like, by the way, Anthony, I see questions from you. So just know that I see them. And I'm going to ask Gary soon. I keep forgetting about the chat box. So here, we have a couple comments and questions, but Jimmy Haslip's the one who pretty much came up with the order of 8 songs from my CD, because the 8 tunes themselves, or however many are on a CD, I think order is relevant and important because it's a complete body of work, even if they're different musical styles and tempos.
Absolutely.
And the journey you want to take, we want to deliver, is important. I miss that too. In fact, one thing I miss, talking with a bunch of people about this, Peter Erskine especially miss it. I loved it when I could go and buy vinyl, and especially if it opened and made a double album, maybe like a lot of Stan's stuff were double albums, and
sure,
even if it's not a double album and didn't unfold, like some of the Buddy Rich stuff or whoever, love reading the liner notes.
Absolutely. And you can learn who's on it. Like now with my students, they're all wonderful. I mean, they're really motivated. And I tell them to go look up something on YouTube or whatever, and they do, and they put the work in. And unless I remind them, though, they'll show up to the next lesson, they'll play well. I go, great. Who's the bass player on this record? I don't know. Okay, wrong. And so I make them take that next step and go out and research it. I loved the LPs. I didn't even like it when CDs came out in that respect, because LP's so big, the
Mhm.
artwork like Bitches Brew and stuff like that, or Live
Amazing.
Evil and Herbie stuff.
Oh, like the man-child cover is really cool.
Oh
And
God,
the
that
thrust
stuff's. I mean,
cover.
I've always been a sci-fi kind of guy,
Cool.
and some of the most creative artwork was on during that period of time. Just I agree with Peter. It was
Yeah.
a great way to learn more about what you're listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a more of an experience. There was besides the music, you had this knowledge you could gain. Who's on it, and whatever the notes were. It's just, and I would read them over and over and over again.
Yeah,
And then if you got really lucky, the sleeve, the insert might have pictures and stuff on it too, which was really
exactly.
cool. That's like a
Yeah.
bonus. So Anthony Christina has a couple things. Um, let me make sure I got it all here. Oh yeah, so the thing I mentioned called Meat Hook, that's a thing, but I know it's a teaching platform, but Anthony, yes, Stick People. Stick People is another platform, I believe, where a lot of these drummers are teaching, in case anyone wants to know. Which leads me to this question, which is actually from Anthony. Gary, are you teaching online? If so, what's your technology setup?
Well, that's another part of me getting some new equipment. I've had to teach. I've been teaching at the University of Oregon for 22 years, teaching drum set. And starting last spring, because of COVID, everything was remote. So I've done a combination of the students like making YouTube recordings and sending them to me, and I can critique them or we can listen to them together. This year, it's almost all been Zoom. There are some real drawbacks in the sound quality, especially with drums. The ride cymbal will overload the sonic quality, and you just get all that kind of phasing. But we've made some changes, and it's driven by the students. I mean, you get these 22 or 20-year-old kids that have it; they own it.
Yeah,
They'll
they
bring
do.
in their
That's
own
true.
little mobile unit, and they'll send me what their music is, and it's tremendous. So I'm able to do that. This next term, spring term, will be my last term teaching at U of O. I'm going to move on and let some young blood come in there. I think that's important. But I will. I feel more comfortable teaching online now, and I'm going to be upgrading microphones and things like that to enable myself to be able to teach online.
Yeah. We have a comment here from Marcus. And Marcus, I'm so sorry I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but it's spelled Sroge. And if I remember, did you say you're in the Chicago area earlier to me today, Marcus? You might have remembered the back room on North Rush Street, across from Arnie's restaurant. Because I used to play at Arnie's a lot, like every weekend.
Uh-huh.
And I would go see Judy Roberts. And she had a drummer with her back in the day, David Dirge. Do you know
Yeah,
the?
I'm in touch with him on Facebook.
Oh, cool.
He was the guy that let me sit in, and there was another guy. I can't remember, Phil Gorteau.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the name.
Yeah, but yeah, they're wonderful
Because
guys.
David George scared me. He was good.
Uh
You he's like, well, I actually remember one day I was going to go to his house and something came up and I couldn't go. Yeah, so Marcus remembers the back room. Yeah, that was a happening place, man. Back in I was there from 82 to 84, I believe. And so I don't know where it is now, if it's still a place or not, but yeah, that was a happening place. Yeah, I was going to go just woodshed with David Dirge for a few hours. I wish I had done that, but I don't know why it didn't work out.
huh.
So this is back to the teaching thing, and COVID has been bad in a lot of ways, and a lot of people's lives have been lost. A lot of people with some serious financial hits. Businesses closing, gigs are not happening, and man, the touring musicians or just musicians in general, if they weren't teaching and they were only performing like live gigs, well, that was a horrible hit. But it's also been an opportunity time, and just in my business, being able to do some of this training that I do. I thought of doing online for years, and I never did it until like the third week of March last year because I had to. And you know what? It's working out pretty well. So it's interesting what can come out of a bad situation and what we can maybe get creative and forge ahead and find ways to help people and teach people and still keep some revenue coming in because we all need to survive. You got to have some, pay your bills and all that stuff. So
Right.
it's interesting. It's interesting how many musicians are playing or are teaching now like this virtual. And
Mhm.
what's well, like you were saying, like you get the 20-year-olds to come in who just own this techie stuff and they know how to do
Right.
it and they can teach us. Boom, we all
But
benefit.
that's it.
Yeah,
Well, the thing is, as soon as they get rid of latency as being a problem, I think it's going to revolutionize everything
yeah,
because, even just performing like you there and me here
hmm,
in a synced up manner,
yeah,
that would be that, and evidently it's pretty close to being able to do that. And if that happens, boy, that's going to blow down some massive walls. It won't be in a room in front of people,
hmm.
but as far as creating music and moving the music along, I think it's very exciting, the things that have come out of necessity.
Exactly, exactly. It's like I like how you talk about well ushering in what's happening rather than talking about back in the day because we don't have a choice. We
Yeah.
have to stay with what's happening and move forward with things. Otherwise, we're going to be behind and we
Or
won't get to
yeah, I mean,
experience all
it's
this stuff.
you
Yeah,
just look at the history of the planet. I mean,
exactly.
you evolve or you die. That's just the way it is.
That's true. Yeah. Well, oddly enough, it was Tom Breckline I was talking, and little did we know that that day that we were speaking, Chick Corea passed away. So that
Oh,
would be 2 weeks ago, 2 days from now, Tuesday.
right.
We didn't, the world didn't find out about his passing until 2 days later. But Tom was talking about how, and this is a parallel with this evolving, right? Says Chico, he said, you're either going like this and you're progressing and you're moving forward and you're evolving, or you're going like this and you're going backwards, or you're going like this, which means you're actually going like this because as you do this, this keeps going further. And if you're on this, the distance gets further between the flat line and the evolution. So you got to evolve. You just have to do it. And it's a real relevant. It's very relevant,
Oh,
which
that's
I
a great way
think
of
maybe
putting
is
it.
one of the reasons that Chick can, you know, keep. It's not like he even really reinvented himself. He just was always doing stuff, but experimenting. And oh, Marcus has a question. What years did you tour with Woody Herman? And would you mind talking about that just a little bit?
Well, this was one of those West Coast things, and it was the Ghost Band. Woody was gone. The
Hmm.
first time I played with the band was in Utah 10 days after 9/11.
Oh wow.
And so as I mentioned in the last one of these things, the Woody Band had been a real huge, left a huge impression on me when I first started because I played with all those recordings. I always wanted to play with the band. I made one error in that Jeff Hamilton reminds me about this almost every time we talk. He came through town playing with Woody's band when Woody was still living in the 70s. And I'd only been off Stan's band for a while. And Jeff was there just kind of subbing. He'd been on the band numerous times. And he asked if I was interested in playing on the band.
Mm.
And since I had just moved back to town, like I was describing to you, I was starting to get this niche going and I got married and then I got on the bus to say hi to some guys and I went, ooh, I don't want to do this. So,
Yeah.
but I really wished I would have.
Mhm.
If I just did it for 6 months, it would have been great. But alas, I didn't. So the first time I played with them was Frank Tiberi was leading the band,
Mhm.
and we played down in Utah. Um, the band of I've played with a lot of different ghost bands coming through town or whatever, and they're okay. They're keeping the name alive, I guess. But that Woody band was killing. They were
Mhm.
just great. It was like they were on the road. They still felt that way, but
Mhm.
they weren't on the road. Frank would bring the book out and they would do gigs. So that was the first one. And then they came up to the Northwest a few more times, and sometimes action gigs off of that band would
Mm.
come up in Seattle, that kind of thing. So I never toured with the Woody band on the road per se, but I played with them on the West Coast. This
Mhm.
would have been, well, like I say, about 2000,
Mhm.
and it was great. I mean, the guys, I knew a lot of them from other bands that I'd played in, and a lot of these other educational projects. We do week-long camps like in the Midwest or down south or
Oh.
whatever, and they'd be big band camps, and you get like John Fedchuk and Paul McKee and
Oh wow.
Ron Stout,
Oh yeah.
just great players.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, Anthony wrote something here. I just want to share with you, Gary, and then other people too, especially any drummers who might be with us. You might want to check out a fellow by the name of Jim Toscano. I've heard of Jim. Jim has been a tech coach online, especially for drummers. And in fact, there's somebody I spoke with recently who has gotten help from Jim with the tech coaching stuff. So, any drummers out there or musicians who want help, look up Jim Toscano, Toscano. Thanks,
I'll do
Anthony. I
that.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I heard he's really good too. Like the real deal, real good. He makes it easy to understand uh, for any of us who might be technically challenged, which would be me. Yeah, all I have is an external camera, a little Focusrite preamp, a microphone, and a computer.
Mhm.
It was a project. I got help doing it from the guy I bought the microphone from, who I think I might have mentioned. Scott Hoke is the host of the Meekum Auto Auction Show. So
Oh no, I watch that all the time.
oh sure, Marcus. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So if you hear the main voice you'll hear is Scott Hoke. He's actually I met him through Jimmy Haslip. Scott's a really good bass player, and he has the voice. He also read the audio version of the book that I released last year on Parkinson's,
Oh
and
really?
so nice that he did that because I ain't got the voice for that.
No, he's got a
Um,
great voice. That's very interesting.
yeah, so that's Scott Hoke, and we're in touch a lot. And I got this microphone from him, and then he helped me with the setup because I it was only two buttons I had to click, but I just didn't know which ones,
Yeah, I know the
and then
feeling.
that made it all work. So, um, well, you know, I think Gary, I think we should do this again sometime down the road.
Anytime, man.
I mean, really,
It's very enjoyable, and I think I mentioned before. Yeah, I guess it's easier as I get older, but I used to be very uncomfortable in this kind of a setting. It was hard for me to speak in a comfortable way, and it was always the guy that was asking the questions that either made it work or not work. And you're
mm,
really good at it. You make it very comfortable. So anytime you want to do something like this, I'm totally into it.
yeah, I'll in fact I'll shoot you a note later today. Well, maybe tomorrow at the latest with an idea that I have, and we can explore that possibly.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
another way to reach people online like this, but a little bit different. And thank you. I mean, when I first started doing interviews, it wasn't about music. It was I have a channel with 150 something interviews, and that grows every week of doctors and neurologists and blah this and that, just having to do with the business that I'm in and educating people. And I usually do 2 or 3 interviews per week on that. And it was a self-indulgent effort starting 8 years ago to just get with people and be able to talk. And then, I can't call up a neurologist who doesn't know me and doesn't have time. You just think I'm some weirdo, right? Uh, not gonna be able to take him out for coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So, want to be a guest on my interview series? Yep. Okay, that sounds cool. Well, and it worked out, and then now it's starting to build like a following. So that's cool. But I have this passion for music, and I'll get around to my original thing here about this being comfortable or not. Uh, I needed to do something with music and reach people like yourself who I've really admired and respected for so long. It's like, gee, I would love to bring your knowledge and wisdom to the world, right? So now that's developing a following. But when I first started doing this, I was like the formal interviewer type of guy, and that wasn't me, man. I was like, don't, I don't do well in that position. I finally, it took about 5 years of that to realize I'm going to pretend every time I talk with anybody, I'm having coffee with them at a cafe. So I always have coffee on an interview. It's usually coffee, sometimes it's water, and I pretend we're somewhere. Well, at this point, I don't usually have to pretend, but what I found is that I'm a lot better that way. I can relax. And I like the live aspect because now we have people asking questions. And that's
Yeah.
really fun for me. And it's a different kind of feeling when we have some type of live interaction. And plus, I found that people are usually fairly comfortable too in this type of organically flowing back and forth dialogue. And you're awesome, man. So if you're at all uncomfortable with anything, we didn't know because you
Oh,
don't
that's
seem
good.
it. Yeah,
No, I
no.
really, I feel very comfortable doing it. And I've had comments from my family and friends that have known me for my whole life, and they seem to think it went okay. So nice job.
And, yeah, really, it's been just great. And the first one we did, it's only 8 days ago, I think, and I mean that got a lot of traffic. So there's a reason for that. What you share is important, and how you do it is really great.
Well,
So
thank you.
yeah, I'll send you my idea here tonight or tomorrow. Got to do a couple things before I can share it. You'll understand when you get the email or the whatever.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
But we're going to do something again, even if it's this or this and something else. The idea, we'll do it. So one more question from Marcus: if there's one Kenton album that Marcus should listen to, which one would you suggest?
Well, uh, the thing
There's
is,
a
when
lot
I
of them.
left the band, there were 3 albums I was on. Kenton 76, Journey to Capricorn, and Live in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
The Live in Europe one has it's live and it had a lot of fire and some really cool playing. The recording quality is not quite as good as like a studio recording.
Mm-hmm.
The Kenton 76 one is the first one that I did with him, and there's some great kind of iconic big band Kenton charts on it that I think came out really well. The quality of the horns and stuff is really good. The Journey to Capricorn one is a good album, but I think the band, I wish we'd have played some of those tunes on the road more. But then there's 5 or 6 other ones that came out that we never got paid for, but they were kind of like bootlegs of Live in Cologne.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's one Live in Warsaw. There's one that's like a dance gig somewhere, stand artistry and something or other, that's got some pretty good stuff on it. And then there's that one I mentioned earlier about that was at Buddy's place that Alan Yankee recorded. In some ways, that's kind of my favorite one because the band was really comfortable. Alan had stuff hanging, mics and stuff, but nobody knew it was going to be something that would be listened to later, so people were more relaxed.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, as far as the public seems to like Kenton 76 the most. And, you know, for me, I can't stand listening to myself 5 minutes ago. So when I listen to myself from that long ago, I go, God, what was he thinking? But it represents what was happening at that time, you know.
Well, I can relate to that too. Although there was one thing I did back in the late 80s that I listened to once in a while and think, that was good.
Right.
The only thing I ever did is I could say that about, for like, really? Was that
Right.
really me? Did somebody say
Uh-huh.
that? I was like, you know, that's, you know why it is? Because it's the ongoing journey of evolving in your thinking and your concepts and your knowledge and in your playing and in your expression of all those things that have evolved. So we change, you know, and that's the great musicians like yourself, you're still moving forward, and you'll always move forward, because that's the only direction that's the best direction.
That's what we're trying.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll be in touch with you, Gary, today or tomorrow. A little thought process I have, and then I really enjoyed this, man. Again, I appreciate your time so much. And
thank you. Same here. I had a great time. Really good
great
time.
great to get to know you too. You know, so many people who do know you, who we also know together, speak so highly of you, and I see why, because you just radiate
Very kind.
big heart, great person, great musician, and wanting to educate people too. I think that's a great thing.
Thank you.
know? Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you, everybody who's watching. I really appreciate it. Anthony, you've been on, I see your name a lot. One day, maybe we'll meet up in person with various people. You know, it's really cool. So thanks, everyone. Marcus says thank you so much, Gary and Carl. Thank you, Marcus, for being here. One more time, thank you, Gary Hobbs. All right. I'll be in touch soon, okay?
Very good, man. I look forward to it.
Me too. And if I ever get out to your way, we got to hang out.
Absolutely. We'll get silly with Northwest coffee. You haven't had anything unless you've been here.
I was in Portland twice, 4 years ago. Oh no, it's going to 5 and 6 years ago, 2 years. And man, there were a lot of great coffee shops and a lot of breweries too, but a lot of coffee shops. And they have a really great neurology team center in it. The main, well, they have some icons in the neurology world in Portland. My next visit there will have to do with that primarily, except for a couple of days I build in for hang time. I have a cousin that's in Olympia, and also Josh, if you see this, we got to hang out. And then I want to climb some mountains.
There are definitely some of those out here.
I'm big into that. You know, I'll bring out my special boots and we'll hit the trail.
All right.
That'll be cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
We'll be in touch soon.
All right.
All right. Take care,
Bye-bye.
buddy. Bye-bye.